Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Saturday, December 9th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris here with you for an emergency Saturday pod in what will be a day Dodgers fans probably remember forever. Shohei Ohtani has picked a new home, and it is, as expected from the very beginning, I think, by many people, the Los Angeles Dodgers, a 10-year $700 million deal. You know, it just got announced by Ohtani himself in an Instagram post a few minutes ago, so we haven't had a lot of time for it to sink in, but that was an eye-popping number, and we were expecting some pretty big numbers on this contract.
Yeah, I guess I have to apologize for my analysis. I had it at 450, thought maybe it could climb to 5, but 7 is a lot. I think as a caveat, one news that's coming out, Jeff Passan is reporting that a lot of it's deferred, and he said a significant amount. So that changes the calculation of what the present dollar value is. And I know that's kind of boring. It's kind of important though, too, because 700 million could be the number that is on the contract, but in terms of present value, maybe it is closer to 600 or something. If he is deferring like 20 million a year, you know, as far as, you know, somebody like Strasburg did, you have to start taking the effects of inflation and kind of reducing that number. In any case, it's a whole big old number. And then some people were like, well, why are you react to the number so much? Because it's 700 million. I mean, the largest contract before this was 426. I mean, yeah, I'm excited for the Dodgers. I'm excited that they got this two-way player, one of the, most unique players that we've seen ever. And it's going to be really exciting, but there's still that risk that what we don't know what his arm's going to do going forward. And that this, 700 million is depending a lot on marketing dollars who knows? It's depending on stuff that's not a bird in hand, and that's not usually what teams do. But I guess the Dodgers were excited enough to drop the baggiest bags of all bags on the table for Shohei Ohtani.
I took the final number as a sign that the Dodgers are confident he's going to pitch for at least some portion of this deal. We know he's not going to pitch in 2024. The expectation is that he could be ready to hit by opening day or at least soon after. We have some past precedent here because he's had Tommy John surgery during his time with the Angels. The specifics of this elbow surgery are not crystal clear. Perhaps some more details about that will unfold now that the contract has been agreed to. But either way, I came away thinking the Dodgers must see a future in which Ohtani can contribute as a starting pitcher, at least for a portion of this deal. There are so many things that make him valuable to a major league organization beyond his on-field role, but this is just a massive, massive get for the Dodgers. And the expectation, I think, came from the fact that they dropped their payroll. They were 5th in payroll in 2023 on opening day, and getting to reset where they were within the competitive balance tax was a huge part of going in and making a big splash this winter. It's going to lead to a lot of speculation as to whether it's going to be more than Ohtani, but thinking about just how much he adds, Ohtani as a hitter for 2024, this should vault the Dodgers to the top of WAR projections once that's baked in, because this is adding an elite hitter to a lineup that already could do a ton of damage.
Yeah, Dodgers were 3rd in WRC plus last year. If you'd rather OPS, they were 2nd. I guess there's a bit of a park adjustment there. It was a great lineup that struck out a little bit more than the Braves, but walked a little bit more than the Braves, slugged a little bit less than the Braves. I mean, those are the two classist lineups in the bigs. Those are the two they're going to go up against each other with Ohtani in the fold. I mean, what's the would you rather on lineups here? That's interesting. You got Acuna and Betts, Freeman and Olsen, and then it's Ohtani versus Albies.
Yeah, I love what the Braves have put together in that lineup.
Riley?
I think you put Riley in that spot over Albies, but I think this would be advantage Dodgers at this point, or a fantastic push. And this, of course, kind of puts these two teams as your your early favorites to collide in the NLCS. And we know there's a lot of things that can happen in playoff baseball, especially with the expanded playoff field. But as Ohtani goes, the one area that I'm thinking about is the counting stats. They could be better than ever. I mean, look what he was able to accomplish during his time in Anaheim. And now we're going to upgrade the supporting cast around him even more. So aside from that power speed combo that he brings, he's coming off the best slash line of his career, kind of by a healthy margin. Ohtani hit 304, 412, 654 last season. That's a 350 ISO, just video game numbers. I know that term gets thrown around more than it should, but you take him and put him into what should be the best lineup in the entire league. More runs, more RBIs, all of those things should go up. Maybe the stolen bases could tail off a little bit. I think the one thing I've always wondered about is as you get yourself into a better lineup situation, it becomes less important to steal bases because you have guys that can do enough damage where taking the extra base isn't necessarily the same risk reward proposition it is when you're a team that might struggle to score runs consistently.
Yeah, he might replace that with some power, though. If you look at StatCast park factors, Dodger Stadium is the second friendliest place to hit homers. Angel Stadium was fifth, but Dodger Stadium is an upgrade when it comes to power. Ohtani already slugged 587 at home against 525 on the road. So, I mean, if you're reporting over a 600 slugging for a career, last year he slugged 654. I mean, it just feels like he could repeat last year pretty easily. Year older with the elbow injury, but with a little bit more of a park boost. And then you're right. I think the runs in RBI are really going to get a boost there. I think the pitching side is interesting. I think the best guess, and a lot of this has been close to the vest, and people are a little angry today because of some of the reporting. There are some mistakes made maybe in the reporting process, but on top of those mistakes was a very secretive Ohtani team. Like, we know, for example, very little about his elbow surgery last year, and that's kind of rare. Normally, the team announces it. You have some idea. You have actually a very good idea of what happened. And, in this case, I think they limited what the doctor could say, and they limited what the team could say. And so we're reading between the lines and thinking it might be an internal brace situation, which has a quicker turnaround time. But that doesn't mean he's necessarily likely to pitch next year. And and even though the tear was in a new part of the elbow, it's still a second tear in the elbow. If you compare him to other places, the reason I got to around 450 was I was going to give him Bryce Harper's deal along with Jameson Taillon's deal. That got you to around 400 million. That's a two Tommy John guy that got the biggest deal for a two Tommy John guy ever before. And then I thought, well, maybe this is a Bryce Harper for Blake Snell deal. That's his comps recently. There's some comps there, a little bit wild, very good stuff. And instead, he got Bryce Harper plus Garrett Cole, which, I mean, I'm not here to say any contract is a bad contract. I don't want to rain on anybody's parade. I'm not trying to focus on that, but I do think it's interesting that there's a fair amount of risk here when it comes to the arm. The Dodgers seem to not care about that. Perhaps their thinking is, well, if he doesn't have to throw on a starting pitching rotation, maybe we can have Mike Trout because he's physically, I think, able of playing center field. Like he's one of the faster players in the big leagues. He can play at least a really strong corner outfield. So if we got Mike Trout, who can also be like Edwin Diaz, so then you start getting, it's still only like 530 million. So then you have to add the marketing money. So then you're saying we got Mike Trout plus Edwin Diaz plus, $15 to $20 million of extra marketing money every year. I'm just not sure. I wouldn't necessarily, if I was running a business, bet on money that wasn't in my pocket yet, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, but you just look at the way it would play out if he couldn't pitch but could play in the outfield, center field, right field, wherever. That big minus you see from the defensive rating goes away, right? He's going to be at least average, probably a good defender if it ever comes down to that. And then the WAR numbers go through the roof. So you could also look at it someday and say it's ended up being a great long-term deal for all of these reasons. It's still in the range of outcomes, even though we're in the stratosphere in terms of what the final dollar amount was for this contract. I'm curious what you think about Ohtani from a fantasy perspective this year. I looked at the December ADPs over at the NFBC. Pick 14, right at the end of the first round of a 15-team league is where Ohtani has been going, and he doesn't have that same appeal that he had last season. I talked about the possible value of taking him as kind of a middle of the first round guy, where if your team lost pitching along the way, you could shift him into a pitching role and backfill your utility spot with the best available hitters from the waiver wire and from your bench. You don't have that luxury this year. We're just evaluating him straight up as a UT-only player with some potential early season playing time risk. So are you in or out at that range? And are we wrong if we're assuming that he's going to creep up a few spots as a result of landing with the Dodgers?
At the very top of a draft, it's possible that your positional value is overrated. Because at the very top of the draft, you're just assembling the best collection of stats. You're just selecting somebody that can hit over 300, hit you a bunch of homers and steal you bases, somebody that gives you everything. So if somebody gives you everything, at utility, is it really that bad? Is that really that bad to clog up utility, quote unquote, when you can just get a late round shortstop to play shortstop? It's like he's a great bat, and I don't think that that's a bad idea to draft him there. I think it seems fine. And in terms of risk, I mean, it would be nice to be like, oh, he's not pitching. Could he, step in the outfield? Well, we saw from Bryce Harper recovery from possibly the same surgery, that Harper did not play first base until the second half. So till late in the second half. So I kind of doubt that he's going to play in the field. It's going to be util only. I think you're right to wonder how many stolen bases, but even if you're not, it's not going to be a zero. I think if he gets to, 15 stolen bases, he at least treads you water there. 40 plus homers, 300 plus RB, 300 plus average. And, it's possible he gets to like 250 plus runs in RBI. I mean, like 250 to 300, like it could get pretty intense there.
Yeah, we could see just some massive seasons here at the beginning few seasons of this deal from Shohei Ohtani, just given all of what the Dodgers have in this supporting cast. And I think the other kind of secondary benefit of this deal being done is now the rest of the offseason can actually happen, right? It wasn't the only thing slowing down the market, but the highest of the high free agents, Yamamoto, Bellinger, Snell, those names are going to start moving off the board now that Ohtani has a home, because many of the teams that were finalists for Ohtani now have large shares of budget available and clear opportunities to upgrade their roster. So I feel like we're going to get to this point even a week or two from now. We're going to say, wow, it kind of feels like we had a month's worth of transactions jammed into 2 weeks. And I think it's because we're going to have all of this urgency around being a team that gets a big upgrade before someone else snaps up those players.
Yeah, I mean, this frees it up. The Blue Jays obviously had some money that they wanted to spend. And, they haven't been necessarily rumored in on Yoshinobu Yamamoto or Blake Snell, but the rumor mills on those guys have just really taken the back seat to the rumor mill on Shohei Ohtani. So, what if the Blue Jays say, hey, we were willing to drop some serious coin. We are ready to go right now. We've got somebody named Nathan Lukes at the top of our left field depth chart, and adding a Yamamoto, I don't know who's the best outfield situation. What if they went for Bellinger and Yamamoto? Because they said this money's burning a hole in our pocket. That wouldn't necessarily be Ohtani, but it would be a shot in the arm for a Blue Jays team that has a lot of things you love about it, and seems to just need a little bit more investment.
Yeah, I think if you're a Blue Jays fan, as disappointed as you are that you didn't get Ohtani, the fact that you were a finalist hopefully is that signal that your team's going to keep spending and keep trying to get over the top with the core that they currently have in place. It would be very disappointing if they're not in on at least one of the other big free agents and possibly two, given some of the needs in that roster. I think, even as it looked on Friday with some of the reports that were going around that Ohtani was Toronto bound, it wasn't. It was the guy from Shark Tank. Big disappointment for all of us. Can you imagine the surprise when you get off the plane and you see 10 times as many people there to ordinarily see? You're like, what happened?
Drones hovering around taking pictures of you.
Probably a slight moment of panic. You're like, did something happen? Did somebody on my team, did some news break about me that I don't know about? Like, what's going on? That had to be
frantic text to the PR people.
Yeah. Is everything good? I think a lot of people were starting to point out the depth in that Blue Jays lineup is also up in the air right now, but it's so early in the offseason. There are plenty of teams you could look at, quality teams that are missing one or two of those lower impact signings that will end up being significant upgrades too. The Jays have those needs on top of the needs to get those bigger pieces up at the top. Now, since you and I last spoke, the Juan Soto trade went official, and we pretty much had it. When Ken Rosenthal joined us on the pod earlier this week, the names involved, I think we had every single one, at least as part of the show. So I feel great about that. I feel like, hey, it's good to know things were as close as reported, and that actually played out the way everyone expected it to. What blows me away with the Juan Soto thing, even with more time to reflect on it, is that nobody else really seemed to get close. And we're talking about one of the best hitters in the game. Now that he goes to Yankee Stadium, I saw some people pointing out that he doesn't get the ball in the air consistently. There's been some variance in his average launch angle and his approach over the course of his career. Juan Soto, to me, seems like the type of hitter that makes adjustments to his environment better than most. And
he could see that outfield wall and maybe do something about it.
Yeah, I don't see him struggling to take advantage of that ballpark. I think this is going to be a monster year for Soto now that we know he's officially headed to the Yankees.
One thing I stand by that I said in that podcast was just that if this is the deal that AJ Preller needed, this was the only team that could give it to him. I suppose maybe the Marlins have to be on that list. And so what would the equivalent Marlins trade be? It would have been Edward Cabrera, Max Meyer, who's coming off injury, Sixto Sanchez, who's hurt. They don't even really have that depth. They're not going to send Ryan Weathers back. The Mariners. Okay, the Mariners could have maybe built one. We know, though, that the Mariners have made deals that are a little bit have more to do with cutting cash than adding cash. And so they don't really seem like the team that would have added Soto. But let's say they were willing to give up Brian Wu. Emerson Hancock is hurt. Darren McCahan is hasn't even proved himself in the major leagues. And, so they have to give up Wu and Miller. What do the Mariners do after they give up Wu and Miller? There weren't many teams. Oh, the Twins. How about this? The Twins give up Louis Varland, Simeon Woods Richardson, and a prospect. That's closer, but then the Twins have to go and then basically spend money to backfill. And even the Yankees, who were able to do this, which I think speaks well of their player development. The Yankees now have, according to Fangraphs, the 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12th best rotation, which is now, I'm not saying that they're like top 3 or 4 or 5 is the 12th best, but they lost all their depth, and that's part of any sort of, what do I think of this rotation right now? Clayton Beeter is their number 5. With 111 innings. I know a little bit about Clayton Beeter. I like Will Warren. He's their number 7. What the Yankees need to do post this trade, because they give up all their depth, is go buy another starter. So they've got a $30 million player, and they have to go out and get another, $10 to $20 million starter to make this work, So, it was a very interesting trade because Preller, it's almost like Preller had to do this, and so he backed himself into poor decision making by making poor decisions in the past. You know what I mean? It's if you hadn't signed Xander Bogaerts, you could have just kept Soto and spent the $25 million you're spending on Xander Bogaerts on pitching. That would have been work. But since you did buy Xander Bogaerts and nobody wants Xander Bogaerts, you need pitching. So what are you going to do? Trade Soto for pitching and not get a top end hitting prospect back, which is what everybody would want to do when they trade Soto, is get Jason Dominguez, somebody like that, get a Volpe back if you don't have a shortstop, that sort of stuff. So sometimes bad decision-making begets poor decision-making down the road. So I'm not trying to defend the trade overall, but I do think that given this history, Preller did fine. I mean, these are I think King is a really good arm, and the other arms are, I think they're going to produce, one or two, mid to back end rotation arms, which is, that's actually really gold. People are like, oh, a number 3 or a number 4. Ew. It's like, what? Do you know what those are going for in the market right now?
Yeah. When you're talking about 12 to 13 million for a Lance Lynn or a Kyle Gibson, and you need 3 of them,
right.
and you have, money issues as the Padres do right now, that's $35 million that you don't have. So to get several of these players back, I mean, it speaks to the depth the Yankees have developed. These were unheralded players across the board in terms of when they were drafted, when they were signed. So you have to give them some credit on that front for turning these guys into quality big leaguers that a team would take back in the Juan Soto trade. And I think when you think about the differences in the park, it just gives you so much more floor for all the concerns you might have had about Johnny Brito as a back-end starter, a number 5 guy for the Yankees. A lot of those fade away when you put him in Petco because of how the park plays and how different it is. The big question is going to be Michael King. Can he stay healthy enough to work as a starter all season? And how effective will he be in a starting role long-term? Because the Yankees have had plenty of needs in the rotation that have come around due to injuries and just underperforming players in recent years. And when you look back at the time that Michael King spent in the Bronx, you're talking about 15 starts over the last 3 seasons.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to a boxing match today, and my kid's going off to his last Jungle Book play. He's the Python Kaha. And so this all came down at a crazy time in our household. But yes, Michael King has had some gruesome injuries. His last injury was a fractured tip of his elbow. I don't even know how to say the thing he fractured. It's like the oleocron joint or something. Sounds like out of Transformers. But he said from the story, he was writhing in pain. He's fractured his elbow before that, I think, or fractured something else. I mean, it's been a bad injury history for him, and I don't know that you can necessarily put down 150 for him. But the nice thing is the other guys, they can all throw 150. I don't know if you want them all in the big leagues, but they've all got to 130, 140 innings last year in Johnny Brito and Randy Vasquez, at least. Those two come with innings. Even Drew Thorpe, the minor leaguer, threw 130 innings last year. So all of those guys have innings. King has the upside. I guess Thorpe has some upside, but when you're talking about a guy who just barely made it to Double-A, you can't be like, oh yeah, we're penciling him in for 150. So, I think that they got innings in the latter half. They got upside in the top half, and I wrote this in a piece. If you want a more detailed breakdown, it's up on The Athletic, but Johnny Brito and Randy Vasquez are the types of pitchers that Ruben Niebla would love to get. And, I had a pitching coach tell me once that, give me guys that are right between AAA and the big leagues that have a wide arsenal. I love that. We're going to tweak this. We're going to feature this. We're going to drop this. We're going to do this. And that describes Johnny Brito and Randy Vasquez. Now, I don't know about out pitches. Randy Vasquez changeup, maybe. Johnny Brito's sinker is pretty good. So, I think they have what it takes, but it's more of a sort of wide arsenal they're going to figure out. But Michael King, if you're talking fantasy, or if you're just a Padres fan trying to think about like what he's going to do in the future, it's going to be excellent when he's in. I think it'll be really, really excellent. He has the sweeper with the most sweep in baseball. Basically, it's like 18 inches. He has a really decent changeup that he locates well and gets the most out of. Both fastballs are pretty good. So it is a little bit like the Clark Schmidt, Hayden Wesneski package with the sweeper and the changeup, but it's the best version of that. It's a little bit more like what you're seeing from the Mariners out of somebody like Brian Wu and just more polished. He's been doing it longer. He's figured it out. You're just hoping for good health from him.
I think the other part of this trade that's pretty interesting is Drew Thorpe. I mean, he adds another quality pitching prospect who's not far from the big leagues to the Padres system. If you think about Thorpe as a guy that spent some time at Double-A last year, got up to almost 140 innings between High A and Double-A, could pitch in the big leagues by the end of 2024. I don't think that's unrealistic. You got Robbie Snelling, who got up to Double-A, even though he was just 19 last season. That's really encouraging. Dylan Lesko, a guy that would have been drafted earlier, maybe the first pitcher off the board in his draft class in 2022, had he not had Tommy John surgery, he could be a quick mover. So there's a future that's not that far away where some combination of those guys could also be in this rotation behind the likes of Musgrove and Darvish.
If they saved enough money in this deal, and they might have, I mean, I think Soto was projected for around $30 million. If they saved enough money to buy, a starter, maybe enough to buy a starter, a reliever, and an outfielder, considering that they had some money to spend beyond, and they already saved some money by sending out Scott Barlow. So if they have enough money to do something like this, and I'm saying, let's say they have $20 more million, right? The money they saved in Soto, not asking them to spend any more beyond that. I would say, go get maybe someone as boring as Martin Perez, or if you can convince like a Seth Lugo to come back on the top end. But I'm not asking them to re-sign Blake Snell, and I think just adding another veteran pitcher would be a good idea. Maybe they can start renegotiating with Michael Wacha. Maybe it's just a Michael Lorenzen, somebody that'll come in and give them a veteran so that they have veterans 1 through 5, basically, to start the year. Then I think what happens is, you start to see a percolation, where, okay, Burrito's not as good as we thought he was, or, Michael King is hurt, or, Yu Darvish is hurt, whatever it is. Then you start to see those guys. And I think that's what you see. What you see, like people are like, oh, we're going to depend on Snelling and et al. And Thorpe. Like, I don't think you do that. Teams don't do that. They don't want to pencil in a young guy right away. They want to let that guy come up when there's a need and sort of prove that he can stay. So, I mean, even if it's something as boring as Martin Perez, maybe that saves them a little bit so they can get Jordan Hicks, and Jung-Hoo Lee. Like, you could maybe fit all of that into the Soto contract, which is kind of amazing. And it tells you what I think the Padres are thinking about, which is just, we have too many needs on this team to keep Soto. And so we're going to basically spread him around. I see what he's doing. And, there are other mistakes that got it to this place, but it's still going to be a pretty good team at the end of it.
The other player involved in the trade that I really like a lot more for 2024 now is Trent Grisham. I think he showed flashes again in the middle of 2023. There was a point where I thought he was lined up for a pretty big second half. The quality of the contact was getting a little bit better. Some of the things he was doing with his approach were adjusted. He goes from one of the most difficult places to hit home runs as a lefty to the second best park in the big leagues by StatCast Park Factors to hit home runs. It's not the only thing he does to provide value. I think being a legitimately good center fielder, that adds something significant that the Yankees needed, right? We're going to see Aaron Judge in center field probably more than you and I would like to see him in center field, but Grisham at least gives them a credible option on the roster to take over that spot. They could play Alex Verdugo left. I think there's still some questions about what they're going to do with Giancarlo Stanton and that contract. If they were to move Stanton off the roster by some means, more likely a release than an actual trade, or at least a trade where they eat a ton of money.
A lot of it, yeah.
Then they could shift things around to make these pieces fit a little bit better. There could be another trade coming on the horizon, but I actually think Grisham was an important secondary piece for the Yankees here, and I don't think he's just a simple throw-in.
Yeah, I think he's going to make it to opening day. He's going to be on this team, and I think he actually is a pretty good fit. Jason Dominguez can play some center, but he's hurt right now, and even when he comes back, since he's coming off of Tommy John, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
How much do you want him to be throwing a lot? You may want to ease him in a DH. I mean, just think about other Trevor Story, Bryce Harper. They're older when they had it, but they didn't come back and necessarily start throwing competitive throws right away. So, this eases the Jason Dominguez situation. Stanton's hurt all the time. I mean, his DM said that. And Verdugo is not always healthy. So, and you don't always want Judge in center. So Grisham is going to steal at bats here and there. I just don't know if he won't get to the same sort of playing time that he had before. I think he might top out at 400 plate appearances next year. But it'll be 400 plate appearances that are good for the Yankees in particular. And if you look at the Yankees in terms of a lineup, in terms of having some backups everywhere, Oswald Peraza is a backup everywhere. Oswald Cabrera and Everson Pereira are outfielders that can come up if someone's hurt. They've got Rizzo and LeMahieu being able to play first. Their lineup seems pretty set, at least in terms of, having a really good 1 through 5, 1 through 6, and then also having backups at every position. So I think they're gonna really focus in on getting a starting pitcher in here. I think Blake Snell would make a lot of sense for a team that has had really good bullpens in the past, and and I also think that it's a little bit, people oversell the sort of Blake Snell can't make it through the 5th. I mean, if you just look at last year, 6th, 7th, 6th, 6th, 6th. I mean, like he actually made it into the 6th in more than 2/3 of his starts. I don't know if that surprises people, but Blake Snell was excellent last year, and he was not necessarily a huge tax on the bullpen. In fact, of his last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 starts in a row, he went 6 or 7.
Yeah, so here's my note. If you listen to the Athletic Baseball show as well, you've heard this before. I am not Blake Snell's agent. I will continue to insist that I do not represent Blake Snell. But if I did, I would be quick to point out to teams that Snell pitched 6 or more innings in 20 of his 32 starts last season. Just for comparison, Spencer Strider did it for 21 of his 32 starts. Corbin Burns, 21 times in 32 starts. Aaron Nola, only 22 times in 32 starts. Justin Steele, 22 times in 30 starts. He only had 2 turns in which he went 4 innings or less. So the blowups aren't as often as you think, and he gets as deep into the game as most of the other top starters in baseball. So I think a lot of the downside concerns with Blake Snell have been blown out of proportion, I think is the fair way to say it. Does he have issues with walks? 100%. But he seems to have a skill of reducing hard contact and having a really low hit rate. There's some part of that he controls. I do think if you put Blake Snell on a mound with a terrible defense behind him, you can really add some bad downside possibilities to his range of outcomes. But as long as he's got at least an average defense behind him, he's someone I trust a lot.
Yeah, you may want to put him on a team that has some minor league depth, which is interesting when you think about the Yankees, because 2 out of every 3 seasons he kind of gets to 120 innings instead of 180. Yeah. So you may want to. It may be a better fit for somebody like the Giants. Is that possible? With Kyle Harrison on the way up, Keaton Wynn showing something, Mason Black showing something, and Sean Hageli being depth at least. The Yankees, the Giants have some need for some star power. They've been linked to Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Jung-Hoo Lee. We talked a little bit, I think, on this podcast about Jung-Hoo Lee's lack of power, and that for me, one of his comps is actually Luis Matos, who the Giants have right now. But I do think that what I've heard talking about this with other people in the industry is that they seem a little bit more confident that Jung-Hoo Lee's center field defense is better than Luis Matos's. And that's been the one thing that's kind of been missing in San Francisco in the outfield is they have a lot of guys who are okay defenders on the outfield, but are poor defenders in center. At this point, you want Yastrzemski in the corner. You want Austin Slater in the corner. You don't have you need a center fielder, and it's kind of hard to buy those in free agency. So I do think that they're going to stick Marco Luciano at short. I had a source sort of confirm that to me, that he would be the opening day shortstop for the Giants. So, if you're looking at ways to improve this team, it's center and perhaps third base, pushing J.D. Davis and Lamont Wade and Wilmer Flores into some sort of playing time situation at DH. So I think that there's an opportunity at third and there's an opportunity in center. So I don't think that Bellinger is their type of player, because they showed when Chris Bryant was in town, that they weren't that big a fan of players without great batted ball numbers, but I could be wrong on that. Maybe it's Cody Bellinger. Maybe it's Jung-Hoo Lee, makes a lot of contact. Could be a Scudero-esque player for them, where he just comes in and makes a ton of contact and plays center field. That could be an upgrade for them. And then Matt Chapman is somebody they've been linked to. I think that would make some sense, actually. I don't know. How do you feel about that second half? I know everyone sort of points that second half. Do you think – I think there's some injury, but – Chapman barreled balls and played great defense. It seems, especially if it's only like a 4-year deal, like it might be a good place to shop.
Because the glove is so good, that gives him such a nice floor to begin with. And I would rather see hard hit balls going the opposite way than see the hard hit rate fall. If those are my two choices, like which thing went wrong? He was still hitting it hard. He just wasn't pulling it when he was barreling it. And we have a long enough track record from Chapman.
It's a little tough in San Francisco, though. That's right to Triple's alley. Yeah, but it'd still be a barrel, right?
It'd still be a barrel, still an extra base hit. I mean, if you expect 20 homers a year instead of high 20s or even 30, then you're probably in the right spot. And I think the defense alone would probably make him a pretty safe signing, even on a 4-year deal at $22-25 million a year.
And maybe that's a good idea to put next to Marco Luciano.
Yes, I think it absolutely is a good idea. If they believe Marco Luciano is a shortstop, that's fine. If they believe they can make Marco Luciano better defensively, okay, I have no arguments against that. But you can take a lot of pressure off of Luciano if you're able to put someone like Chapman next to him on that side of the infield.
The weird thing about this is, we've been waiting so long for Ohtani to sign, and so now there is going to be a loosening of the market. So now we're going to see a lot of deals. We're going to see Yamamoto come through. We're going to see Imanaga come through. We're going to see Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell sign because they had to wait for people to see who had money. Now Cody Bellinger can go to all the people who lost out on Ohtani and say, you wanted a bat, right? And so we're going to see a loosening of the purse strings from the other teams, hopefully. And we're going to see some transactions. But at the other hand, this is, I think, one of the weaker free agent pools in memory. And so if you did miss out, that may have contributed to that $700 million number for Ohtani in a way. It's like, what else are we going to spend this on? So, I'm not trying to poo-poo Blake Snell and Cody Bellinger and them, but I see flaws. I can just give you flaws with everybody left, right? Like Jordan Montgomery doesn't strike out enough guys. Cody Bellinger didn't hit the ball as hard as he used to and was one of the worst players in baseball like 2 years ago. Blake Snell, 120 innings instead of 180 innings, in 2 out of 3 seasons. Matt Chapman hit like 196 after May 1st last year. Seth Lugo, how many innings are you going to get from a guy who was a starter? Marcus Stroman, how many innings are you going to get? Michael Wacha, is he actually any good? Clayton Kershaw, his shoulder is hurt. Brandon Belt, he's like 48 years old. Mike Clevenger, what? I just read off the top guys for you, like literally, like those are the top guys. What did I miss? Teoscar Hernandez. I mean, that's
the
one of the worst.
Agent.
Yeah, that's one of the worst. Plate discipline packages in baseball. It's like Whit Merrifield. Like there was I saw this thing, and I'm being a lit's cynical, and I hope nobody's make anybody sad or angry. But I just saw this thing about Whit Merrifield and like the Royals. Somebody tweeted like, oh, the Royals are interested in Whit Merrifield. They haven't had a second baseman with an OPS plus over 100 in like 10 years or something. And I was like, and they won't get that with Whit Merrifield. So
yeah, probably not going to get that.
What was that? Are you suggesting they could? Because he hasn't done that himself in 3 years. So I don't know. Like, I guess Josh Hader, you could say is a pretty pristine, top of the rotate, like top of the market free agent, but he's also just a reliever, and his command like lost him his job. Like he's a little bit closer to Craig Kimbrell, not this version of Craig Kimbrell, but like, the free agent Craig Kimbrell than people might want to, that might make people a little bit uncomfortable,
Maybe we could try to say something nice before we go.
that was just like a whole like dump of cynicism. Sorry about that.
I know injuries have been part of the story for Tyler O'Neill for these last 2 seasons, so we haven't had a chance to see him stay healthy enough to follow up on what he did back in 2021 with the Cards. That was the 34 homer, 15 steal season. Hit 286, 352, 560. The 2 years since then have been almost identical, like 228, 231 for the average, low 300s OBP, and a slugging percentage right around 400, even a tick below that in 2022. He gets a nice park upgrade, a righty going into Fenway, and more importantly, he just gets a fresh start. It seemed like the dust up that Tyler O'Neill had with his manager, Ollie Marmol, early last season, that was the last straw. I wouldn't have been surprised if O'Neill would have been moved at the deadline. I'm almost surprised it took them this long to find someone to take him back in a trade, because there are reasons to like Tyler O'Neill. So how do you feel about him getting a fresh start in Boston, where the depth chart is a little more crowded than it was after the Alex Verdugo trade to the Yankees, but they don't currently have anyone penciled in as an everyday DH. Right now, it's a floating spot, and I think that makes it easier for them to mix and match throughout the mix of the outfielders they've currently got.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Masataka Yoshida's defense is bad. I'm gonna defer to people who watched him more often. I watched him at the plate some. I can't imagine that I can tell you exactly how good he is defensively, but he was moving towards DH, and Tyler O'Neill is a better defensive outfielder. So I'm gonna guess that the lineup is Tyler O'Neill in left, and now Jim Duran in center, which I think is a mistake.
I think it's Rafaela in center. I think Jared Duran's a corner.
Maybe Rafaela, and so I guess the loser in this. This is not what Fangraphs has right now, so this might be a chance for arbitrage. I think the loser in this is Will Abreu.
He was a winner 3 days ago.
I know, but the problem is I don't think he's a standout defensive piece, so he's not going to play over anybody for defensive reasons. He's a 24 lefty they kind of found rather than, a top prospect, and he's got options left. So, with O'Neill, you have some redundancy in center. I don't know. I guess he makes I don't know if he makes that roster, because I think the lineup is O'Neill, Rafaela, Duran, Yoshida. Yoshida can play some outfield. Wouldn't you rather just have like a career backup type, like a Ref Snyder or whatever it is that fits your lineup needs more than like having a young guy like Abreu in the major leagues not getting at bats?
Yeah, the Abreu problem is frustrating. It's like he doesn't have a clear defensive home. I don't really think he's got anything left to prove in the minors, though. So, he hit 22 homers in 86 games at AAA this year. So you're going to send
a little bit of a pop-up situation, though. He was striking out a lot more before that. So
yeah, and with ABS, you do wonder like how much of the changes in his plate skills were the result of that system and the impact it had at that level.
Yeah, he always walked, but yeah, I don't know exactly what's going on with him. But the batted ball stats, if I knew he had a job, I would say I'm into him, because the batted ball power is enough for me to say he can hit 15 to 20 homers, and at least 20 homers, I think, in a full season. He had almost a 10% barrel rate, 109 max EV, 113, 112.7 in the minors. And I did, there's a nice piece on Fangraphs real quick, just to nerd out just for the last second. There's a piece on Fangraphs about like the most important, hitting metrics in terms of StatCast. And, one thing that's nice about it links back to an old piece that says for rookies, exit velocity is massively, important. So that's one thing to note. And then the other part that it said was 95 EV or 95th percentile EV is better than max, but you could use best speed on Fangraphs if you want. That's on Baseball Savant if you want. But in any case, his max EV shows to me that he can hit 20 plus homers. His walk rate is good. He has some speed. He is a guy I like. I think that is Patrick Newman from NPP Tracker at my door, ringing the doorbell right now.
All right. So, we got to let you go. You got to get to a boxing match.
One last thing. Boston righties pulled the ball more than anybody in baseball last year. Boston lefties pushed the ball in the top 10. Everybody's trying to go for the big monster. I think that might be good for Tyler O'Neill. Just a little bit more pull in the air. Just having that goal for him, like seeing that big old green thing in the corner of his eye, I think might be good for him. He's been telling me that he wants to let it travel, and I don't want him to let it travel. Look at him. He is a man beast. He shouldn't be letting it travel. This is a guy who should be trying to hit 45 homers, in my opinion. Even if he strikes out 32% of the time, if you hit 45 homers, your batting average is going to look okay.
Yeah, well, I'm with you on the approach, and maybe being in that ballpark will force him to make that adjustment. He'll say, why would I let it travel here? Like, this is the place you do want to get it out in front because there's so much potential value in just ripping the ball at the monster. You're probably the first person since like 1970 to go to an early country western swing show and a boxing match in the same week. So
yeah,
you continue to lead a very interesting life.
Shout out to Sam Chess. He invited us to see a really great show at the Station Inn in Nashville. I really enjoyed that. Oh, nice. You bought some merch.
I bought some merch. So I was really into it. I had a great time.
Thanks, Sam. And yeah, I gotta go. He's definitely he's calling me now.
Eno is making people late for a boxing match. So we're gonna go happy Shohei Day. If you enjoyed this show, leave us a nice 5-star rating and review wherever you're listening to this podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like this video on YouTube. We are back with you next week.
Thanks for listening.